Welcome to the Clang app. Today I'm going to be walking you through how to get connected to our Clang system, how to build a mix, and share a couple of tips and tricks on how to make sure you're maximizing our IEM system. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download the Clang app, and you can find that in your respective app store. It's available on a bunch of different devices. And something of note is that there's a demo mode that's built into Clang, so you don't have to be in the building to try the demo mode, and that will give you a really great hands-on experience moving some of the things around and experiencing all that Clang has to offer. What makes Clang different than traditional IEMs is instead of having a stereo field and then obviously our mono, we have a 3D field that we can place things in. So what this means is we can push certain channels forward in our mix, push them backwards, or space them out further left and right. And Clang is using a whole bunch of EQ to change the way that sounds in our ears. Why does this matter? This matters because when we maximize the space that we have to place instruments and microphones, the overall level of the mix comes down. Now, we've taken a huge step forward by not using wedge monitors and using in-ears, but we still want to make sure that we're mindful of the overall volume. Protecting our ears is always the priority. So we'll take a look at what this practically looks like and some ways that you can maximize this. But the first thing you're going to want to do when you come into the building is make sure that you're connected to the FOH Q338 network. This is very important, and the password for this is going to be on the stage rack where the mics are kept. Once you're connected, open up the Clang app and hold the config button. Then tap personal. Now, I'm going to pause here, and I can't emphasize this enough. It's very important that you make sure you select the correct mix right off the get-go, okay? You won't have to do this as you make further adjustments, but every time you come in, make sure you select the right mix. Clang does not know what you're doing on a given Sunday, so please select the correct mix. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to be using this spare mix, but if you were on bass, you'd come in and you'd select bass, or drums, so forth and so on. If you're not using headphones right now, I'd highly recommend you do so because you'll be able to hear the full effect of Clang when you use headphones. This spare mix is just like any other mix, and I'm soloing it right from the console. So what you'd be hearing on a Sunday morning through your in-ears is exactly what you're hearing right now. So the first thing we're going to do is check out the faders page, and here we're able to see all of the inputs that are coming into Clang right now. So this mix is zeroed out, and I'm going to build one from scratch. The next thing you can do is tap the faders button again, and you'll open up these groups. If we go back to the fader section, everything is grouped together by microphones, drums, guitars, keys, playback, and then we have our audience mics, and that's reflected here in these groups. So once you get a good level of each of the individual channels, you can adjust things by group as well. Then we move to the stage page, which by selecting each of the groups, you're able to see their positioning around you. If you deselect this group, it'll show you everything, and it kind of gets a little difficult to manage. So selecting the individual group will allow you to pan things around. So I'm going to leave things where they are right now, and we're just going to deal with the levels of our mix. And I'm going to run some multi-tracks that we recorded live from our gathering. There's no processing on these. This is exactly the way you'd hear it on a Sunday. So as you can see, we've got our inputs coming in, and we're not hearing anything because nothing is pushed up in the mix. So I'm going to start with keys. And then maybe add some bass and electric guitar. Get some click. Bring our MD mic up. And then we're going to move over to get some organ. Add our drums. So that's a pretty good mix, and all we've done is just added each of the channels in one by one and adjusted the overall level. So now what we can do is start to take a look at where they're positioned. And by default, most things are set up spread out stereo or across the 3D field. So for example, the drums default to panning the toms, panning the overheads, and leaving kick and snare always in the center. Same thing with guitars, left and right, and then bass is always in the center. Keys are panned. So that, again, takes advantage of the fact that they're stereo instruments or stereo inputs, and they're set up accordingly. But now we can get a little more creative with the mics so we can hear things better. Right now, all the mics are dead center. So we can take the lead mic here. Let's find the lead mic. There it is. And push it forward. Or we could push it backwards. Left, stereo left, back to the center, stereo right, and far right. So let's push it forward, and then we can add our BGVs in, and we can solo that and hear what it sounds like. I'm standing on the promises of singing, I'm standing, yeah, take a look at our guitars. Right now, the guitars are in the 3D spectrum. So if we go and solo our guitars, we can bring them into a hard left and right. We can push them back. Same thing with our keys. If we solo the keys, we push them back, we can push them forward. And then leave them stereo. So let's take a listen to another song and see what we can do with that. We're gonna take a listen to Battle Belongs from that same Sunday and see what we can do with some tracks and audience mics as well to make our in-ear mix feel a lot more live. So we're using the exact same mix we built the last time, and I'm just gonna fire these and we'll see where we land. So let's solo our audience mics and take a listen to them first. We can hear our congregation, and then let's also solo our tracks. So these are two things that we can use to fill out our mix and make them feel a lot more live. The tracks usually have a lot of synthesizers and pads and stuff going on, and then the audience mics give us a really good picture of what the congregation is singing. And then we unsolo these. And then let's go put our lead in the middle now. Solo our audience mics. So when we throw our audience mics in the mix, we can hear the congregation. It sounds like you've got your ears out, but you're still able to hear all the essential information. And this brings us to my one key piece of essential information in all of this is the four things you need in your mix. The first thing you need is yourself. That's a non-negotiable. You need to hear what you're doing. The second thing you need is a melodic reference, which is the lead vocal. So for me personally, I like to keep the lead vocal in the center, maybe not forward, but always in the center, pretty close to my mic or instrument. So that's your melodic reference. You need to hear where we're going. You need to hear the song. The next thing you're going to need is a primary harmonic reference, which 9 times out of 10 is going to be the keyboard. So I don't push the keyboards out too far into the 3D field. I just leave them left and right because it is a stereo instrument. And then the last thing you're going to need is a tempo reference, which is the click track. It's always important that you have those 3 things in your mix in addition to yourself. Now, you may have your own personal preference for building your in-ears, but that's kind of how I go about doing it. And then this is generally what the default settings look like. We've got our drums already panned out, our electrics panned out with the bass in the middle. We like to leave the low end stuff in the middle. It helps so you don't feel unbalanced in your head. Tracks are always panned, and audience mics are always panned. Generally, if it's stereo, you're going to want to pan that and keep all of the mono stuff like vocals in the center. But again, you'll find your own way of what works for you. That's a really quick overview of how to get going with Clang.